US Secretary of State Marco Rubio today. How will all this go down in Cuba? I've been speaking to the BBC's Will Grant, who's in Havana. Had there been any response from Raul Castro himself?
No, but there has been through the Cuban government, specifically through the President Miguel Diaz-Canel. He said it was a political maneuver devoid of any legal foundation, aimed solely at padding the fabricated dossier that they used, they being Washington, to justify the folly of a military aggression against Cuba. He said that it reveals what he called the arrogance and frustration that representatives of the empire feel towards what he called the unyielding resolve of the Cuban Revolution, and he finished on a note where he said that it was a ridiculous attempt to diminish Raul Castro's stature as a hero. So look, I mean, it is exactly the response that one would expect from the Cuban government at this stage. Earlier in the day, of course, we had seen this attempt, this overture, if you like, by Marco Rubio to speak to the Cuban people and offer what he said from President Trump was a new path between the US and a new Cuba. Now that new Cuba will be one whereby the military does not play an oversized role in public life, that is running the ports, the hotels, and pretty much every sector, profitable sector, lucrative sector of the Cuban economy.
So unless there's actual intervention in Cuba by the US, nothing immediately happens there?
One would think so. I mean, it's clearly not going to be the case that the Cuban government would in any way hand over or be involved in anything that would cause harm to Raul Castro, and they will be indignant about this, both inside and outside government. There will be a lot of people, and we've spoken to some on the streets of Havana who are very frustrated at the idea that this would overlap into their lives. They might not be the strongest Raul supporters, they might be tired of where the Cuban Revolution has led the island in economic terms. Quite frankly, they're tired of the conflict, finding themselves at the end of 20-hour blackouts, you know, the frustrations of trying to have to survive in a situation that is at this point in its relationship with Washington. But I think that the vast majority would agree that the bringing the charges against a 94-year-old man is simply one, of course, who's seen as nothing less than untouchable, almost sacred within the Cuban Revolution, is not what's done.
And those charges, the incident that they relate to in 1996, does that incident loom large in the imagination of Cuban people? Is it significant?
It is very significant. It is one of the flashpoints of the past 30, 40 years in terms of the US-Cuba relationship. What it was a moment in which really the Cuban-American lobby and Havana went head-to-head, and it brought to a point that ended in the loss of life. Now, this organization, Brothers to the Rescue, say they were a humanitarian organization dropping emergency aid to migrants trying to make it to the United States crossing the Florida Straits. But of course, the Cuban government says that they were violating its airspace by dropping leaflets, propaganda leaflets, over Havana. Eventually, it led to this moment where Cuban MiG fighter jets shot down 2 of those civilian aircraft, and led to this point, which today, 30 years on, has brought murder charges against the then head of the armed forces, Raul Castro.
There is much speculation, of course, that today is a precursor for military action, US military action against Cuba. Is that how some Cubans see it? How are people reacting?
I think most people in Cuba, for as much as one can use a line like that, are concerned, are simply concerned about the direction that all this is headed. I mean, you would have said at one point last year that the idea that Washington would drop missiles on Caracas would be a far-fetched thought, that they would basically take Nicolas Maduro from power in his pajamas. Again, unlikely, one would have thought, no more than 12 months ago. And of course, we've seen both of those things just at the turn of the year. So is this a negotiating position, a very strong negotiating position by the Trump administration over and during its talks with Havana about wholesale political economic changes in exchange for lifting the oil embargo? Or is it an actual plan that they could, in some way, remove Raul Castro from Cuba? The very fact that that is an area of doubt, I think, is part of what is at play here. It is to basically tell the Cuban government that this could be on the table.
The BBC's Will Grant. Several governments across the world have condemned Israel's national security minister after he posted footage of himself taunting activists, including British, French and Canadian nationals who were captured while sailing aboard a flotilla to Gaza with aid. The video shows Ben-Gvir waving a big Israeli flag and shouting at dozens of bound activists at a detention center.
They came with much pride as big heroes. Look, see how they look now. Look at how they look now. Not heroes and not anything. Terror supporters.
I've been speaking to the BBC's Emir Nada in Jerusalem about the video.
Well, it's just a video of 38 seconds, but 38 quite shocking seconds. You see row upon row of activists who were seized from this flotilla, bound, zip-tied, in a prostrate position, their heads down so they can't see, a number of them with their t-shirts over their head. Through them you see Minister Ben-Gvir walking through, beaming, taunting them, waving a flag. In one moment he says, "Welcome to Israel, we are the masters here." There is a moment where one activist tries to shout "Free Palestine" and she's grabbed by the hair and pulled down to the ground. So it's quite a provocative video, as is characteristic of Minister Ben-Gvir, who has published videos like this before, but rarely with international detainees, usually Palestinian detainees. But in his brief, he is the Minister of National Security. Now, you remember that these 430 activists were pulled from around 50 boats. This huge flotilla, the Global Samud flotilla, they were near Cyprus just on Monday, 250 miles from Israel and Gaza. They were intending to set sail to Gaza. They say to take aid. They had a token amount on board, but they're trying to draw attention to the humanitarian suffering there. And then from Monday, you've seen this ongoing operation where Israeli commandos ordered these boats one by one, seized the activists. There's been some expressions of concern from Monday because there were reports, we've seen videos of apparently the use of rubber bullets used by the Israeli commandos. And then finally, the last boat was rounded up this morning, just before that video went out, and now it went obviously viral online, and the Israeli government, the rest of the Israeli government, have kind of been going into damage control, issuing their own denunciations of Ben-Gvir's video.
And Ben-Gvir's actions have drawn rare criticism from colleagues of his within the government, including the Prime Minister.
Well, that's right. I think there's an awareness clearly within the government, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, of just how much damage this has done internationally, because you've had a rebuke from the leaders of Italy, Turkey, Germany, France, the UK. Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, said it's unacceptable, it violates human dignity. She's demanded an apology. So you've had the Foreign Minister here saying that it caused harm to Israel, it's a disgraceful display. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, look, we've got the right to prevent what he calls Hamas supporters from entering Gaza, but these actions aren't in line with Israel's values.
Emir Nada, it's NewsHour.
And you're listening to NewsHour on KJZZ 91.5, the perfect mix of BBC, NPR, and KJZZ News. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us this Wednesday. For the program just ahead, then we've got The World this afternoon at 2. Listen more and learn more on 91.5.
KJCC is supported by SRP, the not-for-profit utility prioritizing power, water, and customers. You can find information on savings, reliability, and more at srp.net/value.
In Valley traffic, that earlier crash at the Stack interchange has been cleared, and all lanes are open on I-17 and I-10. Test your knowledge of the Grand Canyon State with KJZZ's A to Z quiz. What Arizona National Forest was the site of a purported UFO abduction in 1975? That's one of this week's questions. Try the quiz at play.kjzz.org. 90 degrees in Phoenix at 1:20.
I'm Paul Henley with NewsHour live from the BBC. Barney Frank, a former US Democratic congressman known for his sharp tongue, who helped reshape Wall Street after the 2008 financial crash, has died at the age of 86. He was also one of the most prominent openly gay politicians in American history. In 2008, he told a 60 Minutes program on CBS News about his journey to coming out publicly in 1987.
I thought about the House leadership, it became clear to me if I came out, I would never be in the House leadership, and that's shown the case because I couldn't expect members from all over the country to then be voting for me and defending that in their own district. On the other hand, it has not in any way diminished my influence as a committee chairman.
Well, I've been talking about Barney Frank with Christine Quinn, who is vice chairwoman of the New York State Democratic Committee and who worked with him.
I knew Barney Frank through my work first as an LGBT activist, and then later on when I was a member of the city council, and then the first LGBT and first woman to be speaker of the New York City Council.
How did you find him?
He was very supportive, very encouraging of people who were younger than him, who were doing work for the community or who were LGBT and wanted to run for office. He was somebody who would get kind of out there in the trenches. He didn't stand on formality. He rolled up his sleeves and did work. Some might have said he was cranky. He would have said he was cranky, but it was always cranky in a good-natured way.
He was said to have a very cutting turn of phrase. Did you experience that?
He certainly had a cutting turn of the phrase, but it was almost always done with a sense of humor as well.
He came out voluntarily in 1987, which wasn't the easiest time to do so, was it?
You know, it is so hard to imagine what it was like for Barney Frank as an elected official in 1987 to come out. This is before marriage was even in anybody's mindset. Before most states had, gay rights laws. He took a huge risk, and what he did really changed the world for people like me and for other LGBTQ people. It made it okay to come out. It sent a message that you could come out and not just survive in your profession, but thrive in your profession.
And he worked hard for gay rights in the AIDS era under President Reagan. He had his work cut out for him, didn't he?
He had an uphill battle, Congressmember Frank, as it related to fighting for AIDS funding during the Reagan-Bush years, and he stood up valiantly. He knew that literally people's lives depended on him being brave and strong and successful, and he did not flinch even for a moment.
He was much praised for his role in the wake of the financial crash, wasn't he, in 2008, 2009?
Yes, Barney brought his signature fearlessness to helping the country come back after the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. He was fearless in holding industry and the banks accountable for what they had caused. And without him, I don't believe we would have seen the comeback that we had.
How do you think Barney Frank will be remembered by those who worked with him and knew him socially?
I think people will remember Barney as a hero and an authentic human being. He never tried to be anything other than who he was and what he was, and in doing that, really changed the world for countless people who were LGBT and would come after him. I also knew from folks who were very close to him that he was the definition of loyal.
What do you mean by loyal?
He stood by his friends, he stood by his community, he stood by his convictions without ever wavering.
Christine Quinn there, the first openly gay speaker of New York City Council. Now in sport, Formula One, NFL and Major League Baseball have all had scandals involving spying on opponents. Now an English second league football team, Southampton, this week admitted to such cheating, and the financial price they'll have to pay could end up being the heaviest in the English sports history. Southampton were expelled from the Championship playoff final by the English Football League after they filmed their semi-final opponents' Middlesbrough's training sessions to try to get information useful for beating them. They are appealing against the resulting punishment and the fact that they've now lost the chance of being promoted to the extremely lucrative Premier League. Here's what some of their fans thought.
I think it's disgraceful that they've been kicked out. Big fine would have been a fair punishment, I think.
We're suffering, fans are suffering because of their stupidity.
They've been doing well, so they didn't need to do that.
Katie Gornall is from BBC Sport in Middlesbrough in the northeast of England. I asked her what the Championship playoffs were and why they were so lucrative.
The Championship playoffs, I think for many football fans, they're some of the most exciting times of the football season. They're effectively a mini knockout tournament at the end of the season to decide the third team to get promoted from England's second tier into the Premier League. So the top 2 teams go up automatically. The teams that finish third to 6th, compete for the final promotion place in the Premier League. The semi-finals are played over 2 legs, and then the winners meet at Wembley. And it's so lucrative because, and it's often called the richest game in world football, because the Premier League is such a rich and popular league. So the winner of the playoff final is guaranteed a minimum of £110 million in Premier League broadcast revenue. But of course, there's more money and revenue available to them as well, if just by getting to the Premier League. So the wider value is estimated at more than £200 million over time. So that's why we often hear the playoff final called the richest game in football. It's a game not just about promotion, but one that could just transform a club's finances overnight.
Now, Southampton have forfeited all that, potentially, because they admitted spying.
That's right. So one of their analysts, as you said, was caught by Middlesbrough spying on their training session. Middlesbrough complained to the English Football League, and Southampton were charged. And then on Tuesday, we heard that Southampton had been thrown out because they admitted spying not just on Middlesbrough but also on 2 other clubs as well, Ipswich Town and Oxford United. So they were thrown out of the game and deducted 4 points, and it's for next season. It's an unprecedented punishment, and it's had to be charged and dealt with very quickly, because obviously this final is taking place on the 23rd of May on Saturday, and the whole city are the team waiting their opponents. It was going to be Southampton, now it's Middlesbrough pending an appeal.
Right, big punishment, quick punishment. We heard what Southampton fans think. Is there much sympathy where you are in Middlesbrough?
I think you can imagine what Middlesbrough fans think of this one. For them, it's been the most chaotic 24 hours, because they went from thinking that their season was over to now planning for Wembley in 3 days' time and trying to organise tickets and that dash for travel. So Middlesbrough fans are jubilant about this, and they feel that this is justice served. Southampton, obviously, their fans feel a deep sense of shame, I think, at their club as well. That seems to be an overriding emotion. And the club itself has released a statement, and they feel that this punishment is, in their words, manifestly disproportionate. They say that it's unlike any other punishment that has been handed out in football for a similar offence.
Is there much point in filming practice sessions? Can it work as a spying tactic?
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, Southampton have pointed out that the 3 teams that they're accused of, that they've admitted spying against, they didn't actually win the games that they played against them.
Katie Gornall from BBC Sport in Middlesbrough in the northeast of England. This is News Hour from the BBC World Service, live from London.
Distribution of the BBC World Service in the U.S. is made possible by American Public Media, producer and distributor of award-winning public radio content. Engaging audiences, creating meaningful experiences, and fostering conversations. APM, American Public Media, with support from Amazon Business. With smart business buying, AI tools help to optimize user experience for purchases, paired with delivery options built for business. Learn more at amazonbusiness.com.
Good afternoon. This is KJZZ 91.5 and KJZZ.org, the perfect mix. News Hour from the BBC continues just ahead.
Thanks to Leadership Society members Ross and Shirley Berg and Gordy and Pat Honeycutt for their support of KJZZ and NPR News. Become a KJZZ Leadership Society member and ensure the future of news and journalism that matters. Leadership.kjzz.org.
One of the most powerful institutions in Cuba is kept largely hidden from public view. It goes by the acronym GAESA. It's run by the military and controls many levers of the Cuban economy: banks, seaports, hotels, and several major businesses. We dive into just what GAESA is and why it has become a focal point in relations between the U.S. and Cuba. Next time on The World.
And that is coming up in 30 minutes this afternoon at 2 on 91.5 and the KJZZ mobile app. 90 degrees in Phoenix at 1:30.
BBC News with Moira Alderson. The US Justice Department has unveiled criminal charges including conspiracy and murder against the former Cuban president Raul Castro. The accusations against the 94-year-old stem from a 1996 incident in which based Cuban exiles. Cuba has denounced the indictment. Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has faced international condemnation after he released a video in which he denigrates detained activists from a Gaza aid flotilla. The US ambassador to Israel said Mr. Ben-Gvir had betrayed the dignity of his nation. Oil prices have fallen by 6% on global markets after 26 vessels were reported to have transited the Strait of Hormuz in the past day. The drop was helped by President Trump, saying negotiations with Iran are in the final stages. The WHO says emergency supplies have reached a hospital in Bunia in eastern Congo, which is in the grip of an Ebola outbreak. More than 130 people are believed to have died. Nigeria's anti-drug agency says it's uncovered the country's largest illegal methamphetamine laboratory, crippling a joint Nigerian-Mexican drug network. 10 suspects were arrested. 2 police officers who helped defend the US Capitol building during the January the 6th riot have launched a lawsuit to prevent those involved receiving payouts from a fund announced by the Trump administration. Police in more than a dozen countries and territories have arrested several thousand people in a crackdown on scamming centres. Hundreds of millions of dollars were seized. And Arsenal fans in Botswana have been left disappointed after a viral notice claiming President Duma Boko had declared a public holiday turned out to be fake. The notice said it was to celebrate Arsenal's first Premier League title in over 20 years and to reward fans for their loyalty. BBC News.
Welcome back to NewsHour. Now a question long asked by children learning about dinosaurs.